I grew up in Kenya. I was born and raised in Kenya, and in Kenya, the conversation around sexual orientation is essentially non-existent. You grow up and you're either male or female, and you're raised as a male child or a female child, and there really is no deviation from the norm. And sexual orientation, well, you're expected to be cis heteronormative, and anyone who deviates from that is stigmatized greatly. And that's very different than what I found in the US, because here there's a lot more conversation around gender fluidity and sexual orientation that I found quite fascinating.
I kind of have a double perspective on this. So when I was really little, up until the age of about 11, I grew up in Korea, where I don't think I realized that sexuality was a thing. I don't think it was ever mentioned to me, ever brought up, ever even like hinted at in media that there was anything other than heterosexuality. So that was just a complete lack of exposure, a complete lack of conversation. And then for the next seven years of my life, I was in Canada, and that's a very different community. So one of the first people I met when I got to Canada, and one of the people that remains a very close friend of ours, is a lesbian couple who helped us a lot in like integrating into Canada and getting to know the people and helping us get ourselves comfortable. And I remember that was like the first time where I was faced with the fact that there are people who do things other than get married to as man and woman. I don't remember that being a very large shock, but that was like the pattern of integration where I just kind of walked in. There were two women married to each other. It was beautiful. They were happy.
So the term xenophobia, at least in the way that I understand it, is extreme hate for the outsider. Some of what I saw in South Africa when I was studying there for 2 years, and I don't think I would classify my experiences, my negative experiences in the US as xenophobia. Yes, I've encountered people who have had stereotypes about me because I was from Africa, you know. People surprised that I speak English, for example, and I speak such good English, but I wouldn't necessarily classify that as xenophobia.
Because I find that my queer identity is very much tied to the English language, to the point where when I'm not in an English-speaking country, it's almost like that part of my identity kind of disappears, or at least kind of fades right into the background. I don't know how much of that has to do with the fact that I don't have the words in Korean to identify myself as queer. The terminology itself just flat out doesn't exist. And I think probably part of it is that we just don't talk about it. And I think it's probably easier for me being asexual because it's not like, that's not exactly something you have to actively hide when you're not in a relationship. You know, the fact that I'm not sexually attracted to anyone isn't something that I really like, because that's an absence of something. It's not something that I have to hide. Whereas hypothetically, if I experience same-gender attraction, for example, that would be something that I would have to hide and ignore and refuse if it wasn't something that I wanted to show.
So as an international student coming into Duke, and one who is very interested in issues of LGBTQIA, I often found myself as the only international, rather I should say African student at the CSGD and the Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity and other spaces here at Duke. And I thought that that was interesting, that there were not enough Africans streaming into the center or attending events organized by the Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity. And I always thought that that was because growing up in Africa, at least in many African countries where homophobia is still very prevalent, a lot of African students come here while they still have internalized such hate for queerness and otherness, such that they do not want to essentially come out and be with other students that are queer in the US. And so that has been my experience, sort of navigating this space and trying to figure out why there's such few students who are willing to engage in the conversation around otherness, that is queerness, and especially in the context of Africa, where LGBTQIA folks are still stigmatized and marginalized by the government.